Caleb and I built a brain in Minecraft. And we're going to start from the very back of the brain and work our way up, and then finish off with like the spinal cord and all that area. So first off, we have this dark prismarine structure which represents the visual cortex. And this area processes visual information from the retinas in the back of your eyes. And the lobe in which the visual cortex resides in is the occipital lobe. And this lobe is responsible for processing visual information from the eyes, such as color, form, and motion. It also helps determine the size, depth, and distance of objects, as well as identifying familiar objects and faces. So the visual cortex basically gives the brain the image, and then the rest of the lobe kind of like guides our perception of it. And moving down for a second here, we have the cerebellum. And the function of the cerebellum is to coordinate movement, balance, and posture. And next, this lapis block area represents vernix area. And this area allows us to comprehend speech. And inside the vernix area, we have the angular gyrus, which allows us to process complex language skills, helps us transition from spoken to written language, and understanding written word in general. Alright, next we have this pink area, which is the temporal lobe. This lobe guides functions like language, memory of events / facts, manages emotions, processes our senses, like hearing mainly, and nonverbal interpretation, which is like a guitar isn't speech, but the temporal lobe still processes it. So that is an example of nonverbal interpretation. Alright, next we're moving up for a second to the honey blocks, which represent the sensory cortex. The sensory cortex processes sensory information from our senses so we can perceive and recognize the world around us. And right next to the sensory cortex is the parietal lobe, which is represented by these oak leaves. The parietal lobe processes sensory information like touch, temperature, pressure, pain, and vibration. And it creates our sense of like kinesthesia, so like our body position. And next up is our motor cortex, which is the slime block area. So the motor cortex controls our voluntary movements and coordinates muscle groups to produce smooth motion. Moving on, we have the auditory cortex, which resides in the temporal lobe. And this cortex detects sounds, discriminates frequencies, perceives speech, and also performs complex auditory tasks. Alright, right above auditory cortex, is the Broca's area, which is responsible for speech production. So vernix area is speech comprehension, and Broca's area is speech production. Alright, moving up, we have the cerebral cortex, and this has many functions, such as memory, thinking, reasoning, problem solving, learning, emotions, consciousness, intelligence, and personality. Alright, so the frontal lobe, which is the largest formation in the brain, is responsible for higher level cognitive functions or skills, like planning, organizing, initiating, and controlling responses. It also guides movement on a very basic level, so like walking and picking up things, very simple things. It also helps us use expressive language, and I'm not meaning like the F word. I'm meaning like modulating our voice. It's also responsible for our social skills and also our personality and intelligence, just like the cerebral cortex. Alright, moving into the brain, we have this gray matter. That's not the gray matter, that's actually your brain. This is the corpus callosum. And in an ordinary brain, this would connect the two hemispheres, but for the sake of this diagram, it does not. And that's exactly what it does. It allows communication between the left and right hemispheres. Alright, moving on to the thalamus, which is this prismarine structure right here. The thalamus is like a relay station for sensory and motor information. And it does not it doesn't relay smell, because smell just goes, the smell just bypasses it, since it's like more essential. It was more essential to our primitive ancestors. And the gray tinted glass, the tinted glass surrounding it is the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus works with the thalamus to process sensory information and regulate body functions. So like body temperature, blood pressure, things like that. Alright. This like coil around the thalamus, which is represented by iron ore blocks, is the amygdala. The amygdala processes emotion, especially fear, anxiety, and rage. And this other coil formation is the hippocampus, which has multiple functions such as converting short-term memory to long-term memory. It also retrieves memory and forms memories and learns from them. It also stores emotions and the events tied to them. Alright, moving down, we got this little black area here, which is the pituitary gland, often referred to as the master gland, because it produces and releases hormones, which like triggers all the other glands throughout the body to activate. So like everything, all your responses, all your fight or flight responses from your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, they're all influenced by the pituitary gland, which is influenced by the thalamus. So our senses go in through the thalamus, and depending on what's happening with those senses, the thalamus can trigger the pituitary gland to do whatever it needs to do, such as fight or flight response. Alright, moving down. We're in the home stretch. We have the spinal cord. The spinal cord transmits signals between the brain and the body. That is its most important function. So if there's something wrong with your spinal cord, it ain't getting processed. Like your body isn't getting processed anymore. That's paralysis. Just above the spinal cord is the reticular formation, which is represented by these iron blocks. And the reticular formation coordinates things like arousal and sleep, pain, attention, the autonomic nervous system, and the endocrine system. Alright, for the final formation, we have the medulla, which is this calcite block. And the medulla controls breathing, heartbeat, and blood pressure. It also regulates reflexes, relays sensory information. It also triggers our gag reflex and our sensation in the mouth. And there it is. There is our brain. It's quite beautiful in a very ugly way.